There's lies, there's bigger lies, and then there's statistics, because you can make the data show whatever you want it to. Hello, and welcome to the Admittedly podcast. My name is Thomas Caleel. I'm the former director of MBA admissions and financial aid for my alma mater, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. In this podcast, I don't promise easy answers or quick fixes, but I will use my decades of experience to help you achieve your education goals. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Admittedly podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Caleel, and today we're going to talk about what to look for when you're hiring a consultant to help your student prepare for the admissions process. How to trust, who to trust, what questions to ask. There are a lot of firms out there, and we want to make sure that you find the one that fits you, your student, and your family best. Might be Admittedly, might not. This is not an advertisement. This is us talking about what you need to think about in order to find the best fit. I want to start by saying thank you to those of you following us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, @AdmittedlyCO, @AdmittedlyCo. We've been getting a lot of great engagement. I want to say thank you for that. Some really good questions, DMs, comments. Thank you, because it's something that I go in, I'm answering the DMs, I'm responding to the comments, and it's fun for me. It helps me stay connected to you, and it really is a great chance for us to have a dialogue, help you answer these questions that you have, because this is a complex process. It's a stressful process. For seniors right now, you're worried about the UC app, you're worried about regular decision. For juniors, coming up pretty quickly, you're going to get assigned your college counselor. So you're doing a lot of the pre-work right now. And freshmen and sophomores, adjusting to the pace of high school, trying to settle in, trying to make your mark. So I get it. But if you are at a point where you're saying, hey, we need to hire a counselor to help us, I want to walk you through some of the things that you're going to see out there. Now, first of all, I think that there's no substitute for experience. And that's why at Admittedly, we only have former admissions officers. Now, former admissions officers who have read at least 3 cycles at a school. And it's very important to have more than just 1 year. Anybody can go do a year, be an admissions counselor, and then move on. But what you notice over time are patterns. You learn how negotiations happen, you spot trends, and you really get a sense of what's happening year over year. But does that mean that if you haven't been an admissions officer, if you've just been a reader or you're an alum, that you can't be a good college counselor? Absolutely not. But what I would do is ask what their experience level is. So if you're working with a counselor who hasn't been an admissions officer, then see what is their pattern over time. How many years have they done this? One of the things I do caution against is hiring a counselor who is maybe a recent grad or current student, because here's the problem, right? Not that they aren't smart, not that they aren't great. And to be honest, they have a great perspective on a school because they're there, they're living it. But what I've found is that you really need not only distance, but you need the perspective of, okay, how did I get in? I have no idea. How did my classmates get in? I have no idea. But I am well-versed in the school, and so I can help on some of the nuanced things. And I've just gone through this admissions process, so I do have valuable insights to share. And there are certainly counselors out there who are current students or recent graduates who are doing great work. But we want to look for are counselors who have invested time in understanding the process, who aren't always saying, well, when I was at Hopkins or when I was at Harvard or when I was at Yale, it's like, okay, part of the role of the admissions counselor here is to step outside of their own personal experience and look at it through the lens of you and your perspective and how you're moving through your high school experiences. So you want to be careful not to get caught up in that. One thing I do caution against as well, and we get asked this all the time, is success rate, success rate, success rate. What are your stats? What are your stats? What are your stats? And I tend to push back on that for a couple of reasons. Number one, there are some consulting firms right now out there touting, we've already gotten students into the Ivy League. And for date reference, it's mid-November when no decisions have come out. And what that means is that they have clients who are recruited athletes and they've gotten commitment letters from schools. And that is great. It's part of the process, totally legitimate. And kudos to those athletes for putting in the blood, sweat, and tears and discipline required to be recruited at the collegiate level. But I always caution people when they're looking at statistics, you want to adjust for a couple things, right? Because there's lies, there's bigger lies, and then there's statistics, because you can make the data show whatever you want it to or whatever you need it to. I'm going to give you an example. A lot of consultants will go out and they'll say, X number of our students have gotten into their top choices. And I always say, okay, great. Adjust that for recruited athletes and pro bono cases. Because if you take, let's say, a first gen student or somebody from an underrepresented demographic, or you take a recruited athlete, that's going to pad your statistics. And if you are, a regular family, just, going through high school, doing your thing, parents are working hard, kids are at school working hard, those cases don't apply to you if you're not a recruited athlete, if you're not a legacy, if you're not a first gen student, maybe coming from, low income circumstance. That track record, that data does not apply to you. So you really want to ask them, okay, great. Well, what does it look like for students like myself? But again, we're in a trap, because past performance is no predictor of future outcomes. And so, over my career, over the career of all the former AOs and consultants that we have at Admittedly, we've gotten dozens, hundreds of students into Ivy Plus schools. That's just the way it goes. But what you want to think about is what's going to happen with my student, right? Because I get 100 students into Stanford, but your student might just not be a right fit for Stanford and might fit much better at Dartmouth or Brown or Penn. So we want to draw some really clear distinctions around what's going on in general and what's going on that's relevant to you and your case. And so this is really, really, really important, because a lot of consultants are going to throw a lot of data at you, a lot of numbers, a lot of things that are going to be confusing. They are parsed in a way that makes them look good. And in a lot of cases, bluntly, they've been made up. And the other thing that they'll do is, a lot of places will do is they'll say, this is where our students have been admitted. And they'll have a top layer of, again, athletes, first gen students, and they'll get admitted in like 5 or 6 schools, right? And they'll list all of those as admissions. And it skews the data, because you think, oh, okay, great. If they've had 10 students get into 5 top schools each, that's 50 admissions. And you'll look at the data, and usually they parse it in such a way that you think, wow, they got 50 students into those schools. So seek clarity, understand data are often manipulated, and you want to be aware of that. The other thing you want to look at, you want to ask questions around, okay, how do you work with my student? And if they're offering you their template for success or their, system for applying, I want you to really dig into that, because the reality is the way you stand out in this process is through personalized individual approach. When you are in a pool of 50 or 60,000 applicants, it's critical that you do your own thing and you do it intentionally and well. And what I find a lot of times is that well-meaning advice is coming through that's like, do all these things and take this course and join these clubs. And it's like, all right, you're telling all of your students to do this. And by telling all of your students to do this, you're basically doing a probability play where you're like, well, if I tell enough students to do this, then in a normal distribution, we'll get enough people on the right side of the distribution who are super successful, and then we'll get some in the middle of the distribution, or the marginal right of the distribution, that will make us look good enough, and we'll just kind of bury or ignore the middle to left side of the distribution. And it's really, really important for you to think about data, numbers, statistics are great, but you care about one statistic, and that is you or your child. And so ask them, okay, how are you assessing my child? How are you helping them discover their strengths? Are you simply prescribing them this, okay, this is how we write the essays, this is how we lay out the application, or are you working with them over time to help them develop and build? And if you look at a successful and good consultant, they're essentially a life coach. They are taking your child and they're teaching them resilience, initiative, self-discipline, self-awareness, helping them realize those things about themselves that they may not be able to tell you as a parent, right? They may not be comfortable telling you as a parent, their hopes, their dreams. We all remember being teenagers. It's awkward. It's hard. And the last thing you want is your mom and dad sitting you down at the dinner table and being like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And have you looked at those colleges, right? It's a tense time. And so what you want is a counselor who can go in and kind of be in the middle of that and interact with the parents. The parents need to trust them to work with their child, because you don't want to be in a situation where the parents are always kind of stepping on your advice and interfering. So you have to choose somebody who you trust to help guide your child. That doesn't mean it's a hands-off process, but it does mean that you have to realize that things have changed significantly since when you applied, and things have probably even changed since when an older sibling, for example, may have applied. For students, you want somebody who you think has your best interest at heart, who asks you questions, open-ended questions. But a large part of our strategy calls and intake calls and milestone calls with students here involve the question, why? Why did you do that? Do you want to do that? What are you thinking about? What matters to you? Why is that important to you? These are things, it's a sense of establishing within the student that sense of self-reliance and self-awareness, so that when it comes to writing the essays, the student's voice is coming through. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with students where the parents are just super helicopter. They're all over the kids and they answer the questions for the student. But, at the end of the day, the student has to write the essays. And then when you get to that point and you ask them, so what matters to you? What do you want to do? They're just subconsciously, or even in some cases consciously, they're kind of looking and they're like, I don't know, mom. What do I like? What do I do? That's not the position you want your student to be in, because they're not successful if you do that. So what you want to do is ask about what their method is. You want to ask them how they guide students. You want to ask them about, yes, the greatest success that they've been able to achieve, but also the failures. What students didn't work out and why? And if any counselor ever tells you, oh, I've never had a student not be successful in this process, they're lying to you. Because all of us have had students who have not been successful because they didn't do the work, because they didn't achieve academically, because they wouldn't listen to your advice on schools. And in most cases, we're able to cut them loose before too much damage is done. Just say, hey, look, this isn't working. I think you need a new counselor. Here's your refund. Please go. We want you to be happy and successful. And that's not going to be happy and successful with us. The other thing you want to look at is, what does success mean? And a lot of times students and families will get caught up in definition of success being determined by U.S. News and World Report rankings. And that's just simply not a good way to define success, because you are setting your child up, you're setting your student up to go out and really they're leaving the nest. They're going out to make their way in the world. And so you want them resilient. You want them to be able to deal with failure. You want them to be inquisitive. You want them to be social. And a lot of what we do when we're working with students, a lot of what I do is roll up my sleeves and really help them develop that, to get their opinion, to listen to them, to let them get comfortable articulating their vision of things. And even if I disagree, we're asking a lot of questions. I'm not just coming out and saying, no, you're wrong. Now, there are some things you might be wrong on, in terms of like the way you're formatting an activity list or choosing an essay topic. And a lot of times we'll be like, yeah, we need to go deeper than that. But in general, when you're working with a student, you're really kind of discovering who they are, because it's that authenticity of narrative that comes through in the application. And when you read application after application after application, it's the kind of thing where that jumps out at you. I spoke to a former admissions officer for a top IB Plus school today, and they said, during the peak of season, they were reading anywhere from like 50 to 70 applications a day. That is a ridiculous pace. And if your student is just kind of following the path that everybody else is doing, it's so easy for them to just blend into the beige background and not even get noticed. And by the way, even if you have a great advantage, let's say I just read the other day, I read an application from a first-gen low-income student. And we really had to go in and I had to say, look, these essays are not compelling. You took a safe path. You're saying exactly what you think the admissions office wants to hear. No, you don't have a huge trauma story, but you do need to tell your story because this story makes it look like you're trying to be this idealized version of what you think they want you to be. But the reality is they just want to hear who you are. And so we were able to go in, we did a lot of work, and this student worked really hard to their credit. They were a little unhappy with the blunt feedback, this honest feedback to start. But then once they kind of, got past the shock and they reread their application, they're like, oh, I completely see this. And so we've torn apart the application and are anticipating really good things for them. So remember, we are at Admittedly, we're committed to transparency. And any counselor that you talk to, any counselor that you're interviewing, you need transparency. Anybody that tells you they have a guaranteed path, anybody that tells you they can promise an outcome, anybody that tells you that they've never, they've only worked with successful students, I want you to take that with a grain of salt. I want you to probe. I want you to ask questions because the reality is no consultant is perfect for every family. We are not perfect for every family, and every family is not perfect for us. And that's why we do a lot of work up front, asking questions, getting to know you. When you do a family action call, for example, with our advisors, that lasts almost an hour. And it's just this deep dive into what you want, who you are, what your priorities are, parents, students, everything else. Look for that. Look for that because if you can find a trusted advisor, ideally a former admissions officer, but if not, somebody who at least has depth of experience in admissions and can bring those kind of years of credibility to you, then they will help your child grow. You have to give them the room to grow. You have to give them the space to grow. And really importantly, you have to give them the time to grow. And so, yes, we've all worked with students who come to us summer before senior year, scrambling, panic, late, and we do the best we can with the materials at hand. But all of us believe firmly in the advantage of time. If we can get our hands on your student, from freshman year and really be there as a guide to the family, answering those questions, helping relieve the stress, making sure they're not layering on too much, making sure, mom and dad, that you are doing everything you can to support without being over involved in the process, we get great results. And we get great results not because we're manufacturing an artificial candidate, but because we're helping them understand who they are. We're helping them grow into that best version of themselves. We're helping them pursue the things that matter most to them. And in that way, we are able to help them find their true voice and then translate that into the application. So bottom line, transparency, honesty, experience matter when you are looking at someone to help guide you. And you do this in all areas of your life. If you're hiring a coach, if you're hiring a mentor, if you're hiring anybody into your life to help advise you and guide you, you look for these things. And it should be exactly the same when you're taking your most valued asset, your child, and preparing them for a lifetime of success. What do you think of this? What have been your experiences interviewing college counselors? What do you think has worked, not worked? And by the way, you don't need a college counselor to be successful in this process. I know that. I'm not saying that. So you can do this on your own. It's hard, but some people do it. It's one of the reasons that we provide free monthly webinars, this weekly podcast, a lot of information on our socials at Admittedly Co. and on our website, admittedly.co. We want to be a resource for you. And I think when you talk to people in education, former admissions officers, we all love what we do. We love connecting with students, and they will go out of their way to help you, advise you, answer your questions, reduce anxiety, because this is what we've dedicated our lives to. This is deeply meaningful to us. This is our passion. This is our calling, and we want to share that with you. So be heads up. Let me know if you have questions at Admittedly Co. on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. I appreciate you. I appreciate your engagement, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you for joining us today. please take a moment to subscribe to the Admittedly podcast and download this episode. I welcome you to share your thoughts and questions with me. You can find us on social media at Admittedly Podcast. I look forward